So for anybody who doesn't know Wayne, Wayne is an absolute legend in the space, and I'm, excited that he was able to talk with us today because everything that Wayne talked about, the examples around the attacks on Ukrenergo, industrial control systems. Oh, we can see your messages just before you go any farther. um, uh, the attacks on industrial control systems in the power grid and other sectors are unfortunately extremely relevant to our sector in the biological environment. If anybody is under the impression that biology is somehow immune to these kinds of high-end adversary attacks, let that end right now. That is unfortunately our future. Very near term future is that we will probably get to see these kinds of attacks affect our workflows. That being said, I wanted to get to a little bit here through a few slides and talk about sort of digital biosecurity, cyber biosecurity, bio cybersecurity. The field has come up with a lot of different terms, but we're all talking about the same thing, sort of the intersection of these two fields and the security impact on biological workflows. Next slide, please. Disclaimer, this is not meant to be a feel-good presentation. I apologize in advance. It is meant to be a call to arms. So if you heard it from Wayne, let me repeat it again. This is very much a call to arms. Every single person that is on this call, if I do my job in the next few minutes, you will either want to change jobs and work in this sector, or hopefully at least we'll get to think about it a lot more on a daily basis, because we need a lot more defenders and people thinking about how to secure this industry. We simply, as a nation and frankly as a species, don't really have much of a choice here. Next slide, please. So just a very quick sort of review. This is a selective sort of review of actions that have happened in the last couple of years ever since the pandemic hit. But just from left to right, on the timeline, the Bureau, UK's NCSC, the NSA as well, DHS, CISA, a range of governmental actors have warned publicly that the COVID-19 crisis was a fuel for nation states and other actors to attack and try to subvert the US and other allies' response. So much so that the activity is extremely active. You have everything from disinformation and misinformation, which most people would know about around the vaccine, with the effect that we have seen in our country, as well as hosting malware on some of those sites. So they're not just doing single sort of attack vectors, they're doing multiple things at once. They're stealing information from regulators, like we saw with the EMA hack late last year, and then weaponized that information and re-released it to the public with the wrong information embedded in it. So what you need to understand very deeply is whatever we want to call it, biocybersecurity, cyber biosecurity, whatever the term, cybersecurity is now an integral part of biosecurity. We cannot have biosecurity without taking into account cybersecurity. It just isn't possible anymore. Next. Some of these examples were already brought up earlier and in the first panel, but the bottom line is that what we're seeing is that pretty much everybody under the sun is playing in this environment. And they're attacking, they're disrupting, they're stealing intellectual property, they're weaponizing information. It is, unfortunately, an extremely active environment. Next. 3, I'm here to tell you that virtually all of the tools, and this is why I wanted to follow Wayne and not be before him, is that all of the attacks that Wayne talked about, there are direct analogs in our field. And virtually all of the tools that are out there are insecure. Many of them come from an academic background where security is not the goal. The goal is innovation, and you want to move fast, right? The previous speaker spoke to that tension. But there's also a market tension, not just in the academic sense, but also in the environment, in the for-profit environment, where you're just first to market. Security doesn't matter. Instrument vendors haven't had to think about authentication and security and strong security built in from day one. This is not something you can slap on at the 11th hour. This is something you need to design in from the get-go. If you are in this sector, I urge you, please, please, please put this as a core requirement. We cannot build a secure bioeconomy and a bioeconomy that will even thrive if we do not consider security in the environment. And that could be biosecurity, but in particular, cybersecurity is an area that needs the most attention right now, the most urgent attention in my mind. So all of the tools that are in here, you have to think about everything from a plate reader to a bioreactor to a barcode reader. All of those are part of your critical path. And we need to secure them and to design them to have assurance built in. All right, next slide, please. This is a sort of the corollary of point 3 is that unfortunately, the vast majority of the world's biomanufacturing infrastructure is extremely vulnerable as it stands today. And I took an example. I wanted to bridge the two fields here. I took the headline from the Colonial Pipeline hack from a few months ago, if you recall, that affected the eastern seaboard here in our country, and just replaced a few words. This, of course, this is just, it's a play. It's a, you know, I'm making modifications on purpose here, but the reality is that a headline like this is probably not far from reality for us. And we need to start thinking about security, frankly, like yesterday, but you know, we need to really, really build this in. We cannot have assured biological processes without strong security built in at every link of the chain. Next. So, are you feeling bad at this point, or do you feel like completely lost and a little bit depressed? Next slide. Please don't. We really need you. It's time to get to work. It really is time to get to work. There's a ton of opportunity in this space. There's opportunity in the private sector, there's private in the public sector. It is time for us to get to work so that we can realize the explosive potential, in a good way, the explosive economic potential of the bioeconomy for our country. It is really time for you. This is I mean, I'm going to spend my entire career in this environment. Many of us in this room will. But if you're not considering it yet, please consider it now. Next slide. I'll give you a couple of examples. The company that I started and run, we did a joint event with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. We did this at DEF CON this past summer. Tremendously successful event. We had more than 250 people sort of sign up with full names and resumes and everything, which is just phenomenal. People who really wanted to get into this event. And the goal here was really to teach them this intersection of the digital and the biological environment. How can you understand the threat space so that we can start plugging these holes? We need the workforce that will help us actually sustain the weight of this environment and start building a real foundation. Next. So here's what we need. We need defenders with an attacker's mindset. We need biologists and biomedical professionals. We need cybersecurity professionals. If there are any in the room that are interested, please come to Bio. We will cross-train you. We will help you cross-train so that we can actually build real strong foundations. We need people at this intersection. This is not going to happen if this community doesn't, multiply by 10 in the next couple of years. We will probably not be able to keep pace with the growth. Chemists, any scientist effectively that wants to learn about cybersecurity, that needs to learn about cybersecurity so that they can do their job better. Next. Here's what we must do. We have to learn from the mistakes and the history in industrial control system security. Again, Wayne is a leading light in that sector, and there are others at national laboratories and other environments, even in the private sector. We must learn from finance as well and the power grid. These are sectors that have gone through, and unfortunately, many of them we've seen recently have suffered through many of the same mistakes that we are recapitulating in bio. We need to build strong authentication, strong security as a foundation of our entire field. We need to build that into from day one. We also need to assess the insecurity and security of the existing tools, right? If we don't know exactly what holes we need to go plug, well, we're not going to do a good job. And then finally, we really need to get together as a community. I have to commend the Alan and Ken here and the team at CSU for being clear leaders in the space. We need more of these. We need more of them around the country. We need more institutions caring about this and training people to do it. But I'm very grateful that we are able to gather here today. Next slide. On the community side, one thing I'll mention, Nina, who will be speaking in the next panel, who leads the BioISAC, and I and others have come together to actually create an information sharing and analysis center. It is a nonprofit whose goal is to actually share information, threat information among industry members in private, so that we can actually, leverage the strength of the community and of the group, rather than sort of being isolated and getting picked off one by attackers. Our values there are very clearly rooted in helping securing the bioeconomy, helping sustain this growth for the long term, very action oriented, and really we aim to be a convening place for the industry. And so we would love to see any of you join us and sign up. It's a membership organization. Go online, please sign up and send us notes there. We would love to have you. All right. With that, I'll conclude.